seeds, you're going to water them, you're going to make sure the soil is fertilised, that the wind is kept off things, and that you might be adventurous and you might grow beautiful blooms, or you might grow vegetables you never thought of before. You might buy seeds and you could experiment, and sometimes you'd be disappointed. But actually, as with the parable of the sower, you go on sowing, because that's the whole thing of being an optimistic gardener. So, anybody want to comment? Any gardeners here? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. A chef. Now, who likes cooking? Right. So, you want different recipe books. You want to hear other people's ways of making the things you do. You want to try new things. You want to feed your family. You want to enjoy yourself. Anything else about being a chef? It's creative, isn't it?
Creative.
It's resourcing. It's life-giving. Now, servant is a model of leadership which has been used so many times, and it's very much part of Jesus' own model of, washing the disciples' feet, being, just on when he's going to have a day off, and then he sees another 5,000 people come round the Lake of Galilee, wanting healing and all the rest of it. So the day off gets postponed, but the danger, if we think that we are Jesus, is that actually we're not. The whole church is Jesus since the resurrection. So if we go off on one and think, well, actually I'm Jesus, well, we're really in trouble. So actually we do need days off. We need recovery time. And if you think you can work, the same thing 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you're off your head. And actually looking up, I saw something the other, I think it's a leaflet in this building that says something like, if you're caring for other people, you need to care for yourself. And Jesus said you have to love other people as you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, how can you help anybody else? Now the scapegoat, yeah, that's a real, I put that in because it is quite provocative. There's been, I think, a long tradition of some leaders hitting dumps with rubbish, like treating. I think that part of maturity in a Christian community is being able to hold a hot potato. What I mean by that is if somebody tells you something difficult or problematic, then you can hold it. You can hold it. What people tend to do is pass it on. And that actually creates problems and trouble. But you need to be quite mature and prayerful and have a life with God to be able to hold on to difficult things and try to resolve them rather than to be simply passing bad stuff on. It's something about being able to absorb sin, broken relationships, difficult arguments that people have. The danger is that if you can't do that, you simply pass it on to somebody else and don't remember it. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's something about the maturity of being a Christian. See, the more you go into being a community of relationships, the harder it is. It's much easier to go to church, sing hymns and go home again. Anybody can do that. And it's all down to the pastor and see you next week kind of thing. But if you're going to be a real community, then you've got to learn this hard way about being people of integrity, people who care. As soon as you begin to love somebody, you're into suffering, aren't you? Because actually, if they're suffering, you're suffering too. But there's a guy called René Girard who spent a lifetime studying the scapegoat mechanism. And actually, communities think that if they can exclude the one person who is a troublemaker, the one person who's always making things worse, then we'll all be happy. But it's not the case, because even if you boot them out, they're still there. And Jesus actually said the one thing that's excluded is exclusion. If you look at Jesus' life, you look at, say, the woman who was accused of adultery, or other people who made life hard for other people, Judas. Jesus didn't exclude them. He actually bore the pain of them being there. And that takes a lot of hard work. not in a sort of talk and chalk way, but in a contemporary adult learning stuff, so that people can learn and grow. Because if you tell people stuff, well, they don't learn it. It's not the same. I think we need those who are wise, and it's very difficult to define, isn't it? But you and I know in our communities the people that we know are wise, and they're wise because they are steeped in God. There's one lady in our congregation called Anne, who just unfortunately had a operation on a brain tumour, but she comes to our morning prayers every day. She is a walking example of what Christianity is about. She's a wise one, and her phone. Oh, she's in her 80s, but in the evening her phone is usually hot with people ringing her up just to talk about things. And that's a hidden piece of work. And then pastoring people actually helps them to grow, doesn't it? It really giving time to people. Not just saying how are you and then getting on with something else, but if you choose to ask somebody how they are, then having the courtesy to listen. Because it's very difficult to find people who will listen to you in our society. Everybody's so busy. So that's all the things I think that make for the growth of a community. Growth in faith, growth in maturity. And there's something about churches that don't have to be useful. I mean, how can I put it? Simply by being church in that sort of way, you change society. Actually the world needs churches to be churches. Like Wells, an American and an Australian bishop were having a conversation about how difficult it was to keep people in church. And sorry, I can never remember which one was which, but one of them said, well, it's the cost of the timber to make the fences, and all those miles of fences you have to put to keep the sheep in there. It's so expensive. And the other one is, look, we just need water holes. And I don't know which was which, but I'm just saying that actually you don't need fences to keep people in if you've got a water hole, because they can't keep away. Then there's this thing about direction. A shepherd obviously helps the sheep to stay together and to stay in one place. I love this word navigator. I was very fortunate to be invited to go to New Zealand for about 5 weeks. And while I was there, I learned a lot about the navigation of the Polynesian islanders who had first populated New Zealand and some of the other islands. Without maps, without compasses, without any knowledge, except reading the stars, the cloud formations, the colour of the sea, the way the wind was blowing, the kind of birds that were to be found. And these navigators, and they were nicknamed Red Eye because they had to be on deck for 20 hours a day in order to understand. And they were like a computer, they were reading the situation all the time. So they could tell the crew more or less where they were. And they could actually go north and south in this way of navigating without any of our modern navigation instruments. And I just think that's a fantastic image for those of us who are leading churches, to somehow be able to read the signs and therefore be able to guide, but not on their own, because somebody actually has to cook and somebody else has to steer and somebody else has to row. So it's a team effort, but without the navigator you're not going to get very far. Then there's the bridge builder, the pontifex, the one who actually connects us with each other and with the situation. Mission is fairly obvious. The prophet, there's always somebody who says the wrong thing. I mean, I don't know whether you know about Belvin team theory, but the plants is the person on a team who's always asking the wrong question, who always annoys everybody, but enlarges the conversation. And if you can bear the plants, if you can actually contain the plant, you become a much, much more effective community. The danger is that you tell the plant you're not needed, or don't come next. You tell say the meeting's on Thursday when it's actually on Wednesday. So, interpreter, yes. Pioneer, consultant. And then, I think in our day we don't like authoritarian stuff. Certainly in England, clergy and leaders who come over as old-fashioned parents don't get very far. But actually, parenting is a much more subtle art, isn't it? Especially as I find as they get older. You've still got to be the parent when they're 30, when they're 32. And it requires a shift of ground as how to do it. And actually, you can't invent churches from nothing. There has to be some boundaries. There has to be some link with what other people say of churches in the past and in the present. So all of those words, I think, are also about holding us to account. We had an unusual bishop in England called David Jenkins for quite a while. Unusual in the sense he was both a prophet and a bishop, and it's a very difficult thing to hold the two together. And he used to define the church as the group of all groups that wants to be in continuity with the original group and know that this requires a degree of accountability. It sounds a bit stupid, but it's actually saying the church is always a network. It's always actually a negotiation with all other attempts to be churches across the world. Okay, so, I mean, I just think that you need to make sure that you've got some people who are leaders who are emphasising about growth, some who are helping us to find direction, but some who are actually looking at the faith and the way it's shaped. And you'd be very lucky to find all of those three things in one person. So, I'm going to ask you one more question, then it must be nearly time to go home. Can you just talk to each other again